There's lots of ways to meditate, lots of spiritual practices, a lot of things that we can do. Most people, they want to wake up, waking up, what does that mean? What is enlightenment? What is enlightenment? And for me, I would always describe it as this, and partially because I've heard it described this way. And it makes perfect sense to me that nothing more is needed in this moment for things to be any better than what they are. And we've all probably experienced moments like that, but they're fleeting, they're just temporary. And so somebody that is awake, totally awake, like an enlightened being, would experience the world in that way all of the time, where nothing more is needed for things to be the way they are, because nothing is expected from the outer world. Everything comes from within. Every experience is experienced from within because of the kind of the oneness, really. And I know that's kind of a blanket term, but it's how our senses, how we connect with everything in the world, the things that we see and hear and smell and touch and taste and think about are, an awakened person would recognize them as coming from out there. And so it's almost like it's not a big deal, it's not that big of a deal. And it's kind of like understanding that we aren't born and live this world and then die, and then there's nothing before and nothing after. That just kind of sounds silly to me, anyway. For a lot of people, that sounds exactly like the way it should be. There's birth, and we live this life, and there's death, and there's nothing. But if an awakened person, like in Buddha's example, for example, he experienced his past lives, and and hundreds and thousands of them actually, he experienced these past lives, and not so much the lives, but the lessons that were contained in them. So he used them for his teachings. He used these examples of things that happened in a past life, and he recognized the teaching, and he got the teaching so that he wouldn't have to learn it again. And that was actually the basis behind his teachings and what we call the Dharma, the Buddha Dharma anyway. The Dharma, that term Dharma is another blanket term which means the truth. And it could be, Dharma could come from anybody. And actually, when we practice meditation, for most of us, and a lot of us, we are actually experiencing the Dharma firsthand, because we're not relying on the outer world to teach us. Our teachings are coming from within. So, in my experience, I'm very fortunate to say that I've had some really good meditation teachers, and these teachers expressed all this stuff to me, and I've been exposed to it for quite a while. And whenever I have these moments where everything feels complete, I go back to these teachings and I ask myself, what is this? What is happening? Is it some kind of an awakening, or is it an understanding? Is it just awareness of the truth and all these different things? So from my own personal experience, it was through the practices that I'm able to recognize these things. I'm not saying I'm enlightened or even awake. I'm just saying that I can easily recognize these moments where everything feels complete, and when everything is just the way it should be, and the person experiencing everything with me, for example, would totally disagree, that, hey, this world is screwed up, and then there's somebody that says, no, it's supposed to be this way. And From my experience, it was through meditation and these practices. And when I say practices, I mean meditation, but I don't only mean meditation. I'm also talking about the practices of all the practices. That could include hypnotherapy, all the practices of meditation, like visualization or guided imagery, contemplation, and different types of contemplation. But it also could be the practices of, I think I said hypnotherapy already, but different ways to go into the subconscious mind. Dream therapy or dream work, and the study of the psychology. There's different practices in psychology that we use. Journaling, for example, and even timeline therapy is a way to get into the subconscious by reviewing the past and watching the things that come up based on that. And the yogis, the Patanjali yogis, yoga practices, the bhakti and jnana, the other ones fail me right now, but there's 5 yogis, and basically, the Buddha knew about all this, because I'm getting into Hinduism already, but the Buddha, for example, knew about this because he was Hindu. He was kind of a rebel Hindu, and then kind of broke off and kind of did his own teachings and kind of simplified the path for a lot of people. But he was Hindu. And so he understood, these different practices, and he really talked a lot about meditation, but also there's the bhakti yoga is a practice of wisdom, and or a jhana is the practice of wisdom and understanding wisdom. And it's said to be the more direct path, but the most difficult. And so that's like a wisdom, kind of teaching. So even in Buddhism, there's the mindfulness and meditation, but there's also the wisdom practices, and then practices of morality where we are in service for others all the time. And that is a legitimate spiritual practice for a lot of people, to be in service. I heard somebody talk about that today, that they go into meditation in the morning and they ask, how can I be of more service and help more people? And it can be a daunting situation when you get the answers. Like, there's a lot of things you can do to help people. And all these things can be kind of incorporated in meditation, and meditation can be a part of all these. So I would say the crown jewel of all the different practices is meditation, but we should always keep in mind that there are other practices that we can do, and very legitimate ones as well. My background is a musician, and I had the pleasure of freezing my butt off, actually, in Lambeau Field. I played guitar for the Green Bay Packers for 3 years. It was a 23-piece orchestra. It was a jazz band. And everybody in that band could wear gloves, except for me. The trumpet players could wear gloves, the trombone players and the saxophone players, they could all wear gloves. The drummer, of course, was wearing gloves all the time. I'm talking about below freezing weather. The keyboard player, I look over and he's playing the keyboard, the electronic keyboard with gloves on, and doing a really good job too. And the bass player, I looked over at the bass player and he would be wearing gloves because the strings are, they're real fat, and you can boing, 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 boing. You can play bass with gloves on, and the people in the stadium would never notice, really. But the guitar, you cannot play guitar with gloves on. So I'm trying to form these chords and make this music out of a steel string guitar, electric guitar, below zero weather. Literally, I mean, when it's that cold and your skin touches metal, it goes right through the skin. The skin is nothing, And so there's a lot of times I'd be sitting there trying to play guitar, asking myself if this was a good idea or not. And but I did it for 3 years just because it was at that time like the coolest gig you could get in Green Bay, Wisconsin. And I learned a lot about football. I learned a lot about the fans because Lambeau Field is a very historic football stadium. And it's shaped like a bowl. I mean, it is a bowl. You know, when you think of a Super Bowl, I think of Lambeau Field because it is a bowl, you know. And there's a practice, I guess you could call it a practice, but I don't know, most of the people are so intoxicated they're not practicing anything, but literally, but there is the thing called the wave that they do. Everybody know what the wave is in football? Where everybody would stand up and go, you know, they make the noise and they make the wave, and then so the wave is actually, you're waving like that, and you're waving, you know, everybody's kind of doing it with their voice too to make that that sound, and then you get in sync, and it goes. It's like a wave effect that goes around the stadium, you know, and everybody watches it like, wow, that's really cool, you know, and so it's kind of like taking a blanket and going like that in slow motion, you know, the waves. And the stadium looks like that, and everybody gets really in sync and everything. And I think the football players probably hate that because everybody's watching the wave and they're not watching the players on the field. But it's usually done when one team is really ahead of the other, and it gets kind of boring, or that it's just a real boring game, and the fans. You know, it just takes a couple of guys to go, and then, come on, and then all pretty soon, you know, they start thousands and thousands of people doing the wave. But the wave, I borrowed that term for a meditation, and because of the wave, you know, waves are really symbolic in a lot of ways. You know, the rhythm of a wave, and everything is in, you know, we always talk about the flow and being in the flow, but even in the flow there's a wave. I was talking to a client yesterday about the wave of life. You know, we're born and we die, and seemingly we come into this world, and then the body dies, and we go on. That's my take on it anyway. But it's not like we start here and go here and then end, or even start here, birth, and then go here and end. It's more like this kind of thing. Like there's ups and downs, and we experience it all the time. So life is very much like a wave, you know, this thing happening. And if it wasn't, it would be boring. So, you know, we have these moments of, these wonderful moments, and these not so great moments, and everything in between, you know. So life is really a wave. But so there's a lot of analogies. When we breathe in, when we have a inhalation, there is you know, a moment of energy coming into the body, and most of us understand that and realize that there's we're bringing energy into the body. And so there's kind of a peak. And a lot of times when people think of breathing, they think of this being the inhalation and then this being the exhalation, you know, breathing in and breathing out. And that in itself is kind of a wave. And you can see it in my hand. I'm waving, you know, up and breathing in and exhaling. Inhaling, exhaling. Hi. So I'm waving, right? But even in a more subtle way, and I'm straightening my back because I'm going to start talking about this, actually has something to do with the S curve in the back. When we breathe in, we don't realize it. Our chest is lifting slightly. So this S curve, you know, like this is our head, and this is the body at the side, and our back kind of goes like this, you know. And so this is the front of us, this is the back of us, you know, this is our back. And so we got kind of this S curve. And when we are really hunched over, we would be like that. But if we breathe in, you know, somebody says, take a deep breath. we can't do it when we're bent over like this. If somebody would say, take a deep breath, and then pretty soon we straighten up and go, it's just seeing if somebody was messaging me in a secret way, like, are we streaming, and that kind of thing. So when we breathe in, this S curve of the back is actually straightening out like that. It's very subtle, but it's like straightening, and then there's a compression when we exhale. It's very, very subtle. And so that is actually the wave I'm talking about. So that is the premise behind this meditation that I call the wave, and to think of a wave as we do it. And we're thinking of the breath and also the posture, and when we do that, it does actually help our posture quite a bit, whether we're sitting in a cushion or sitting in a chair, it does help. So, with that in mind, I will guide us through a meditation based on meditation called the wave. Okay? So please make yourself comfortable. Close the eyes if you like. You can rest your hands on your lap or on your knees, on the thighs, wherever you like, wherever's most comfortable for the hands. Some people like to fold the hands. Whether you're in a chair or lying down or in a seated posture on a cushion on the floor, we should keep in mind that the back should be fairly straight. We don't want to curve the back just primarily because of the purpose of breathing. We want the breath to flow nice and evenly throughout the body. We don't want to restrict the breath in any way. And it's important to keep in mind that we're not trying to manipulate the breath. We're not trying to change the breath. Just letting it be very, very natural. No forcing. No forcing of anything in meditation. Just allowing everything to be natural. So the breath is really symbolic of the practice. Just like everything else, the one breath comes in and it leaves. It's very, very impermanent, coming and going. We can feel energized in one moment and then relax the next. Usually that energy comes to us when we have an inhalation of the breath, and the relaxation and sometimes fatigue can be noticed when we exhale. And I would go so far as to say if we are going to manipulate the breath at all, it would just be very, very subtle as far as maybe taking a little deeper than normal inhalation in order to bring energy into the body, or maybe a little bit deeper exhalation just to relax the mind and body a little bit, like a sigh. But sometimes we can feel as if we're mastering the breath. That we are in complete control of it, but yet what this ultimately means is that we are allowing a lack of control of the breath and just focusing on it. So being a master of the breath is a master of the observation or the awareness of the breath. I know very few meditation objects that are equal to the breath. Because the breath is always there, it's always available. It can be boring and exciting at the same time. We don't have to be focusing on the breath in order for it to work, but yet we can focus intently on it if we like to. And when we notice the inhalation of the breath, notice the elongation of the spine, that natural S shape that we have within the spine seems to get straightened out in a very, very subtle way when we inhale. And we can prove it to ourselves when we take a very deep inhalation, but we don't have to do that to understand that in a very subtle way the spine straightens very slightly when we breathe in. Just because of the structure of the body, the rib cage lifts, the lungs lift. And this kind of tilts the upper part of the body up a little bit. We can exaggerate it if we like, but we can still get a feel for it even if we're sitting very still. And then again on the exhalation, the S is probably more prominent. And when we look at that slight S as a wave, there is movement within the body. Nothing is permanent. Just like a wave on the water, or a wave as far as sound goes. Any kind of wave of energy is not stagnant. It's always moving. And that's how we are. We have these waves throughout the entire body. As subtle as they might be. These waves of energy. And this energy is much more than skin deep. It extends in all areas of the body and the mind. Every thought we have is a wave of energy. Every sensation, every emotion, every feeling. So we have very gross and prominent waves within the body. We have very, very subtle waves. But they're happening all the time. They're moving all the time. There's a lot of movement going on, even though we're sitting still. So we start with the big wave. We notice the straightening of the spine when we breathe in, the compression as we exhale. We can use that to strengthen our posture. Keep more energy within the body, which is another wave. And perhaps the most prominent waves that we could say that we experience are the waves that connect our inner world with our outer world. And these are waves that we could, this type of energy is the connection that we have between what we could call the oneness with everything, or love. How we experience and share what we see and hear, smell and taste, touch, and think. Just kind of bring your attention back to the breath if it isn't there already. Ask yourself, how much of your attention was on the breath? And how did it feel while it was on the breath? How did you feel while the attention was there? Just a light kind of focus. And of course, the intention of doing this is that we become very present. And we find a measurement of peace of mind in the moment, which translates to finding peace of mind in everyday living for us, outside of meditation. So just the simple practice of focusing on the breath and sometimes looking at it like a wave can be very helpful for us. And bring our hands together in front of us, if you like. May each one of us and all beings be well, happy, and peaceful. May no harm come to us. May no difficulties come to us. May we all meet with spiritual and worldly success. And may we have the patience and the courage and the understanding to meet and overcome any problems or any difficulties that we might face in life. Thank you.